Afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all enjoying your time in Dublin so far at the Web Summit. I suppose it's not lost on me that the topic we're discussing is titled Marketing the Cloud, and given that many of you would have been delayed by fog in London and the UK in the last couple of days, I see the humour in that, all right. We're going to try and keep you entertained for the next 15 minutes or so, and we're going to start with a very specific question, very narrow-framed. Thomas, what's the future for big data and marketing clouds?
Thank you for the easy question first. Well, I think it's important when we're looking at big data and marketing clouds in general to set a little bit of context. For most marketers, it's still currently the actual use of big data is a myth, because big data is very much like making something beautiful out of metal. First, you have to get it, and that's like the ore, and then it must be refined. You have to put it into some format that can make sense. Then you have to build it into a sense of where you can actually transport it, like put it into metallic cubes, and then somebody has to work it to make some action. I think a lot of us are even still at the point of where we're still even getting that data in. But when we're talking about the true future, if we're like looking 5 years out or 10 years out, I think there's some really fascinating stuff that's happening right now that you see little glimpses and shimmers of what's going on. I can ask you a totally unfair question, actually, in exchange. Have you heard of Ashley Madison?
I haven't personally myself. Has anyone else in the room heard of Ashley Madison? Any personal experience of it?
Yeah, full denial. But besides the fact, I think one of the most fascinating things I've seen in the last year is big data, in the end, is going to be us talking about machine learning and artificial intelligence and how that governs marketing. And one of the most fascinating examples is this Ashley Madison thing that happened. And we found out after the leaks, after some really smart reporters went inside, that they had actually built robots, like actual bots, chatbots, that almost worked on an artificial intelligence basis to interact with their customers. And so it would have entire long conversations, and because they charged per the message, they made millions and millions upon revenue by building artificial intelligence robots that would have sexy conversations with their customers. Now, when you look at what's going on today, you have Siri, you have Cortana, you have Alexa, you have all these amazing objects that we have in our everyday lives that respond real-time to cues. If anything, I would say that those brands have the true one-to-one marketing right now. So when you look at that stuff and you look at the future of marketing, why isn't there a point, and you're seeing this kind of some of the new Facebook stuff coming out, why isn't there a point in the future where we actually all have our own artificial intelligence customer service and interaction bots? And so when you look at that even on like things, but again, we're still way early in the data, but I think we're definitely going to see a huge movement in clouds to actioning machine learning and artificial intelligence to really drive this communication. It ceases to become this conversation about a journey. I've never had a journey with a brand. I might go into their store, I'll enter or exit anywhere I feel like. To actually respond to that requires either A, an actual human like you used to have back in the day like a shopkeeper, or B, some type of artificial intelligence system. So,
how far down the line do you see that being, that artificial intelligence? And for someone who struggles to turn on a mobile phone, how frightening that sounds?
Yeah, well, I think you see snippets of it now, right? You see, I ordered my Harry Potter Halloween costume from my Amazon Echo, which was Alexa. I'm like, order me a Harry Potter costume, and it just did it. It was kind of amazing. And that made money for them, right? I was sitting on my office desk at the time. So I think it's here with some of the companies now, and I think that we'll see it pushed down. I think the companies that built their own systems are going to have the easiest time first from the ground up, but I think companies like my own and everything that are really focusing on this artificial intelligence and gathering data in are going to do a lot better.
And how has Emarsys had to change to meet the needs of the market and changing technology so far?
Let's take e-commerce as an example. In e-commerce several years ago, it used to be that there was one equation that would govern all of how marketing thought about the universe, which was really that traffic multiplied by average order value, multiplied by conversion, equaled revenue. And everything a marketer did was based off of getting one of those things to move. You worked on the website to get conversion up. You bought ads to get traffic. You tried to raise the average order value through upsells or whatever else. And it used to be that would get you to the retailer top 500 list just if you had enough cash. And that's no longer the case. You're seeing that as the digital market matures and as more people jump into the pool to do this thing, there's less customers and everybody's fighting for them. So what ends up happening is that you realize that acquisition is the beginning of the process, not the end of the process as a marketer. And so you really need to focus on recurring revenue. We see some numbers that like a 1% increase in recurring customers can equal a 10% lift in revenue. I mean, the numbers can be insane. So I think what we looked at is instead of just kind of looking at this acquisition or just email-only model or this other model, we really tried to move forward. We're not a young business, we're 15 years old. So we've been around for, a century in internet terms. But it's like dog years, I swear, for startups. But besides that, what happens is that we really need to focus on holistically serving the marketer and giving them these tools in a consolidated fashion so they can even use them, and not just focus on acquisition, but also recurring revenue in all the channels.
Talk to us about the marketing B2C cloud that you developed and the significance of that.
It's a little self-promotionary, but look, I think it's more interesting to talk about scale. We have 1.6 billion unique contacts in our system. Well, actually, no, it's 1 billion unique contacts, 1.6 aggregate. What's interesting about it is when you have 3.2 billion active internet users, that means we probably have, a sixth to a quarter of the world's population in there. What's fascinating to me for us is as we evaluate this stuff and kind of, we really focus on 4 core things, right? We focus on analytics, omnichannel automation, prediction, and personalization. But what's more interesting to me is as we move towards that future, you have to have a big enough data set to even train the machine, right? Or even learn these things. And so for us, with these monstrous amount, we send 6 billion messages a month. As we're doing that, we really, like I said, focus on holistically serving the marketer at this massive scale. B2C businesses have a much harder challenge in some ways than B2B in a way, right? You have much heavier scale, right? You have recurring revenue problems because you're focused on acquisition. And let's be honest, consumers are inherently unpredictable creatures. Nobody really truly knows what the next hot toy this Christmas is going to be. We have no idea. We try to guess, but it always surprises us. Like, remember Furbies from a few years ago? Like, really? Most of my friends bought them and taught them how to swear.
Most of your friends, not yourself, of course.
Yeah, of course not myself. We don't talk about that on stage.
I suppose when you look at it, and you mentioned it, personalization, is that the key to what you're trying to do, or is that the goal, is that the aim that you want to get to?
I think personalization and all these conversations around one-to-one and journeys and everything else are really aspirational goals we have. And every human being wants to be talked to on a personal one-to-one basis. But I think we're still in the problem of solving the siloed data issue, right? Especially for companies that have been around for a really long time. I have a friend who works for a company that heavily does mail order. And they have one of the best databases on earth that is completely and utterly based off of addresses and has no digital sense. And they have 50 years of maturity dealing with that data set. We are very young in dealing with large cloud data sets for digital marketing. And I think in the beginning, because channels were so young, we had all these point solutions, all these singular solutions that cropped up. So you'd have like a Twitter solution and a Facebook solution and all these things. And so we bought best in breed. And what we're seeing now, and I've been talking to a lot of analysts and everything, is kind of a rebellion in the market where we're like, we've got 20 systems, none of the data aggregates. How do you even get a single customer viewpoint so you know when one thing touches another? At one point, we had a large major customer that sent out millions and millions of emails that took them 3 weeks to send one campaign before we engaged, because everything wandered around in CSV files and Excel sheets, and one data analyst had to manually integrate it because they had all these different solutions. It's really hard. So I think before we even get to personalization, we have to get to a competency among all the channels that we even have to even provide a singular message. I think that there are systems that are doing the personalization thing, but I'd say the theme for this year is big data, cohesive data sets, and non-siloed data is the goal. Because people are realizing that personalization can't even happen until that exists.
Talk to us about your own role as CMO at Emarsys and how that's had to change and develop.
Being a CMO nowadays is interesting. The numbers, it used to be that the average lifetime of a CMO was 18 months. I mean, it was just, insanity. And that's eased off a little bit in the last year or so. I think people in the audience can tell I'm a total technical nerd geek, and I love technology, and I started more on the programming side than anything else. And I remember very distinctly many years ago having a conversation with my IT department at a previous company, and they said to me, yeah, we would love to do that integration for you. That'll be 3 months and $30,000 worth of payroll. And I looked at them and I'm like, you've got to be insane. This is a simple integration. And it's the advantage of being able to look at them and say, so can I just have access to the code repository? And they go, why? I'm like, because I could code that in about 2 hours myself. And then magically, somehow, the next day it was done. It's kind of one of those magical things. I think as marketers, the role of the CMO has become, one, much more business goal-oriented. We really have to understand how revenue functions and all the equations thereof. And two, it's become incredibly technical in its own way. And I offer every single person on my marketing team, if they want to take a code class, it's free. I will pay for it. And that's anyone on my entire marketing team. And I really push them to try to learn that stuff, because I think in the future, we talk about how we have great copywriters in the business, and we have all these things, and the number of people who know code in a marketing department is astronomically low, or can even have a technical conversation. Some of that has to do with the early days. I think in marketing, we underpay technically based juniors to an extent, because they could go and get, if they're engineering minded, they go and get an engineering job, which obviously has a much more astronomical rate. So what are we doing to the pool there? So we have to very much train internally. And so I think the role of the CMO has changed in that understanding. And then obviously having a great partnership with your CFO. I'm blessed with one of the better CFOs I've ever worked with, who understands that running marketing is like a portfolio in investments. You have high-risk investments, you have bonds, you have stocks, you have a huge portfolio. And I often think of marketing, like done in its best form, as you have those. And I'll sit down and have that conversation with him and my CEO about how do we build the portfolio of marketing. Yes, I'm going to try this crazy thing that's totally out there, but we have these performance marketing techniques that are really important, and I think that's super key how that's done.
And finally, we're running short on time, but that's how the role of CMO has developed for you and changed so far. How do you see it developing over the next 5-10 years?
In the next 5 to 10 years, I think it's going to be consensus building among technical departments, really understanding the role of recurring revenue in the system, and we call that churn control often. And beyond that, I think the weak point where it's always been, which is really trying to build a partnership with sales for sales enablement, which is, I think, often way too ignored.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. Show your appreciation for Tomas Puig.